And just like, you know, you choose your airline, thank you for choosing this session. It's nice to have you here. Today we're going to be talking about cognitive psychology and how can that help us master intercultural relationships. The overall model that I'm going to use here is that, first of all, intercultural relationships and difference in values and behaviors that are driven by values most of the time excites our amygdala, the more emotional part of our brain. And what we're going to be sharing here today is how can we create some cooling systems so that when we get too excited because of cultural differences, how can we, you know, pretty much do the ice bucket challenge on our own and relax a little and keep calm. And then on my PhD, I studied wisdom, and a particular part of wisdom that is related to self-control. And I realized that actually one of my gurus in self-control, he started his career writing about intercultural relationships. Because in intercultural relationships, what you're trying to do is to build pro-social behavior. And to do that, we need to override the demands of the ego, which is very much connected to self-control. So in the end, everything came together and boom, here I am. Okay? So I'm going to share some examples based on the students that I worked with and that are now here in the United States, foreign patients in the United States, and how they deal with their doctors, their American doctors. The first thing I would like to do is to establish here in the room if we have a common language to talk about different cultural values and how those cultural values shape and color the things that we do. The quote that this patient sent me was, over time I became accustomed and understood that the doctor here in the US is only a doctor. And you wonder, you know, why would somebody say a doctor is only a doctor? He or she doesn't have to be your best friend or confidant, doesn't have to play the psychologist role, the teacher, and the father figure. What are some of the cultural values that are shaping this kind of statement? And why is she feeling the feelings that she's feeling? And this person is coming from a very diffuse cultural value in which the doctor doesn't follow that specific role. The doctor has actually many roles, and the role of, you know, someone who listens to your problems and treats you as a whole. So this is something that you as an admissions officer, and you have requirements that you follow. And in MBA, we require the GMAT, and all of a sudden the person is asking for all these exceptions. What are some of the cultural values that are at stake here, right? And he is probably coming from a very particular, that's how von Strombenars would call it, particular type of a cultural value in which we negotiate things, and that rules don't apply to everyone equally, as opposed to a very universal type of role or job that an admissions officer has, is that, hey, you either have that requirement or you don't. And the person here is negotiating, saying, but listen, he's not like anyone else. He graduated from his. So the hypothesis is that cultural differences, they exist, they're based on values, behaviors, attitudes. They create emotional response. And the emotional response basically means that, you know, oddball behavior makes us anxious. Anytime we see a behavior that does not fit with our view of the world, the amygdala starts to get excited. You know, this does not fit the box. What do we do with it? We have an emotional reaction. And most of the time, we are more emotional than rational beings, or at least the emotional part of us will speak first. And that's when the cooling system comes, and that is the rational parts taking over. But if we don't, if we're not reflective and aware of it, the emotional part will dominate the conversation, like we saw in a lot of these conversations before. By understanding cultural differences, we can lower our level of arousal, adjust the emotional temperature. So what we're going to try to do here is give you some tips and tools that have been tested in cognitive psychology, neuroscience, that they can actually cool the emotional system, that you can maybe teach to your students or to your staff. And that leads to empathy, trust, understanding, better communication, better customer service, and better patient care. And that increases quality of overall experiences and quality of the services that we offer and results. The limbic system of the brain, the more basic or older more primitive part of the brain, is composed of course, the hypothalamus and the brainstem. And basically what the hypothalamus and the brainstem are constantly doing is scanning the environment. Scanning the environment as for any oddball type of behavior or any threat to the system. As soon as this area identifies any disconfirming data, oh, there's something there that's not clicking, there's something different. Why is this person asking for this exceptions when he or she knows that, no, we require the GMAT. No, the transcript belongs to the university. No, here I am the doctor, you're the patient. We are no, nothing else, nothing more than that. And you know what that creates? That creates frustration. The amygdala will respond, triggers an emotional response, and actually there's a lot of research that shows how these emotional responses most of the time are physical responses. And those are the 3 F's of responses. We can either fight, we can fly the situation and abandon the situation, or we can freeze, and freeze is that situation where you don't know what to do. So the system becomes very, very hot, the emotional system. And what we're going to do is think about ways to cool it. Also, what I think is very important in intercultural communications and relations is the concept of action chains. But action chains are expected behaviors in social encounters. But anyhow, there is that expectation of what comes next. When people come from different value systems, and most of the time this action chains may be broken. If too many chains are broken, there is something that's called derailment of dialogue, when we withdraw from the active world. Well, the same thing with medical care. In Brazil, the doctor will treat you throughout the process. Here, the doctor says, what do you have? No, I had problems with my arm. I'm going to raise your arm. Okay, you don't have anything. And he leaves, and then all of a sudden comes the nurse, and oh, this is what you have to take. Just take some pills, and you're going to be all right. And I'm like, you know, where's the doctor? And that was a major chain that was cut. And that, I don't know if I received good treatment or not, but now my emotions are coloring everything. So, the way we do it, we monitor, we label it, we reappraise it, we work with something called mental contrasting, and we work with something that is called implementation intentions. And now the idea is to share that with you. So monitoring can't change what you don't acknowledge. So if we want to improve our diets, we have to pay attention to what we are eating. Can regulate emotional response when we are able to successfully monitor what's happening in the environment around us. Now the question is, what do we monitor and how do we monitor it? It's critical, and how we can develop it, we can make it more sophisticated, is by developing labels. We further develop our language or our coding system. And there's nothing wrong with having a coding system. And this is what happens with medical doctors, for example. You see a patient and the patient says, I have fever. So boom, right there, he labels, he puts one label, you have fever. But that label alone is not enough. You need something more developed. What do? A second label. What else do you have? I have a headache. So it's fever with headache. And that builds a whole different construct of what the potential disease could be. Fever, headache, and muscle ache. What could that be? Could be the flu. But his labeling is not complete yet. If he stopped it there, he would be treating the patient for flu. But then he goes on and he realizes that, no, there is a skin rash. It could be now measles. We don't know. And on top of that, he has another label. There is blood in the stool. What is that? You don't know that very much because you don't have it here. Dengue fever. Thanks to the different labels, he was able to better understand what was happening with the patient. It's better to have a label than not to have one. The one that I use is von Stroepener's Cultural Dimensions. You go, somebody here said that she went to Ecuador, Ecuador. So we were driving this van, the van driver wants to enter this parking lot, and the parking lot is closed, and there's a security guard there. There's a chain stopping anyone from going in, and we needed to get off. We just wanted to get off, and the security guard, going. Then the woman opens, or tour leader opens the window, puts her head down. No sea malito. And that means don't be bad, don't be mean. Okay, go. And then he let us go in. I'm like, hey, that's a great thing, you know. If this was probably on a very universal-oriented culture, no way. No is no. You're not going to enter. So if rules are on the way, a particular culture will appeal to personal relationships. Then we have specific versus diffuse. The degree to which individuals are assertive, to the point, or evasive in relationships. Also, specific and diffuse control how we relate to each other. So in specific cultures, we are very purposeful in relating, and that is the doctor-patient relationship we talked about before. You were a doctor, you treat diseases, you treat the patient. In a diffuse culture, that relationship becomes very muddled. The lady there, you heard her say, oh, psychologist, father. This has everything to do with wine tasting. How many of you are wine buffs? Wonderful. Wine for me, you either have good or bad, right? I'm completely ignorant when it comes to really appreciating wine. But there's a lot of research actually from behavioral economics that says that if you create a preference vocabulary or a consumption vocabulary, just like we went through right here, right now, with this cultural values, you become much better making decisions. The people who receive the vocabulary were much better at expressing their preferences. I like this better than that because now you can compare and contrast. And they now have a hook. Before, it's just an emotional response. I like it, I don't like it. Now you have an emotional, you have a hook that takes the emotional response and brings it to a different level, and now it's much more rational than not. Reappraisal. Think of a person you dislike. An interview. Yeah. Well, usually if I ask you to give me 100 adjectives about this person, what's going to happen is that after 20 of negative adjectives, at one point you're going to start saying things that are either neutral or somewhat good. Okay, yeah, maybe she's good looking. Maybe she's tall. I appreciate the way she looks or the way she's balanced. I don't know. You go from only a negative perspective and you immediately start to think about that same situation in a different way. So one of the ways that I approach cross-cultural interactions, when I'm interacting with people, and this happened actually, we were in India at a fair, and fairs in India are tough because there are thousands of people and they ask you the same questions over and over and over and over. Because I always use reappraisal. I'm like, it's not their fault that they're asking the same questions over and over, but you're forcing yourself to see the situation in a different way. So the way that I do it is, this is a learning opportunity. This is a learning. I don't know what I'm learning, but this is a learning opportunity. Okay? Why is this person acting in such a manner? You ask yourself, where are they coming from? What cultural value is guiding this behavior? What can I learn from this encounter? I wonder why this person is saying such a thing. And this was also discussed in today's morning session. What are the possible roots of this behavior? Actually, you talked about in your session as well. And you teach Italian history, etc. So what are the historical factors that made these people act the way they act? Why is it okay to be late in Italy and not in the United States? Where did it all begin? And immediately, you may never find the answer to this question, but it gives you a new insight into the situation, right? And another thing that is another way of reappraising things, and this I learned from the CEO of PepsiCo, is assume positive intent. Whenever someone is attacking your amygdala and you're pissed, and assume positive intent. Assume that that person is not doing this to hurt you, that this person is doing whatever he or she is doing with the best intentions possible. And immediately you start to gain a greater understanding of what's going on.
I recently learned that you took a group of students from your country on a field trip on a university van on Saturday.
These students are from one of our partner schools, and I'm responsible for them.